Before the gleam of Yankee Stadium, before the legend of the house that Ruth built, there stood, perched high above the Hudson, a ballpark born of ambition and raw terrain. On a swampy ridge in northern Manhattan, where mosquitoes swarmed and outfielders sometimes lost the ball in the distance, the American League planted its flag in New York. This is Hilltop Park. Join us as we climb the hill, dig into the rock, and uncover the forgotten first home of the Yankees. In the winter of 1902, professional baseball in America was at a crossroads. The senior circuit, the National League, dominated the major league landscape. The upstart American League, guided by its president, Ban Johnson, hoped to gain legitimacy by expanding to the biggest market of all, New York City. In Baltimore, the old Orioles franchise was floundering in receivership. Johnson saw an opportunity. He needed financial backers and a ballpark in New York. Enter Frank J. Farrell and Bill S. DeVry, two men ready to invest. Their purchase of the Orioles for about $18,000 secured a New York entry for the American League. At a press conference on March 12, 1903, Ban Johnson announced the new club's home, West 156th Street and Broadway, less than 10 blocks from the aging Polo Grounds, perched on a rocky ridge overlooking the Hudson. And what a sight! A low swamp ran near Broadway, but above it climbed a ridge of solid rock, 12 to 15 feet higher than the street level, sloping off gradually toward Fort Washington Road. Trees had to be uprooted by the dozens, swamps drained, and rock blasted away. One New York Times reporter described it vividly. From Broadway looking west, the ground starts in a low swamp. It rises into a ridge of rocks perhaps 12 to 15 feet above the level of Broadway. As the property is today, it will be necessary to blast all along the ridge, cutting off a slice of 8 feet or more. But there are about 100 trees to be pulled up by the roots. In other words, they chose the high ground for a reason: visibility and prestige. But the ground itself was merciless. Over $200,000 was spent simply excavating and making the land usable. And the timeline? Relentless. The ballpark was built in roughly 7 weeks. The ballpark needed to be finished in spring of 1903 in time for the new season. Players initially dressed in their hotel rooms. The clubhouse was not yet complete. The grandstands, bleachers, everything was wooden and hastily assembled. When it finally opened, Hilltop Park featured a single-tier, wooden-covered grandstand stretching from the third base dugout, arcing behind home to the first base dugout. Uncovered bleachers extended down both foul lines. From behind home plate, a fan could spot the Hudson River and New Jersey Palisades in the distance. The official name was American League Park of New York, but it quickly became known as Hilltop Park, in part because of its lofty perch and in part a nod to the team's nickname, the Highlanders. This was not just a new ballpark. It was the American League's beachhead in New York, a bold statement. We are here. We will challenge the old guard, a scene setter for the decades to come. But ambition does not erase terrain. The conditions at Hilltop Park were, in a word, rugged. Imagine walking through Washington Heights on game day, across rutted streets, through horse and buggy traffic, climbing up to a ridge. Then you get to the ballpark. Uneven playing surface, large rocks protruding, swampland where right field would be. In the early days, the outfield was so rough that after a heavy rainstorm, water pooled in depressions, and the outfield became a pond deep enough to drown a baseball. Players, officials, and fans all knew this was no manicured infield countryside. The original playing field dimensions were monstrous. Left field line was about 365 feet, the right field line was about 400 feet, and center field measured as much as 542 feet in one configuration. That meant if a ball was hit to a deep center, you had a long run ahead of you. Inside the park, home runs were common because the outfield was so vast and the terrain so tricky. In fact, one researcher noted that from 1904 to 1906, the ballpark averaged more than 30 inside the park home runs per season. nearly 4 times the league average. But the club and grounds crew fought back. After only about 6 games in 1903, the right field depression was roped off and a temporary fence moved in, reducing the right field line to about 300 to 310 feet for the rest of the season. By 1904, the right field was pushed back to around 385 feet. The center was about 420 feet. Still large, but more manageable. Still, the grandstands were wooden, uncovered bleachers, sight lines were erratic. If you were sitting down the foul line, the angle to the field might be awkward. The left field bleachers angled toward the foul line, reducing foul ball territory space to as little as 15 feet in some places. And then there were the crowds. The park had a seating capacity of around 16,000, but with standing room in the outfield and foul lines, the effective capacity might reach 25,000 on big days. Again, this was not a polished modern stadium. It was a wooden, hastily assembled venue atop a ridge facing the elements and the Atlantic coast weather. From the vantage of a 1903 fan, attending a Highlanders game at Hilltop Park might have felt adventurous. You climb up a steep street of Washington Heights, pushing past horse-drawn carriages, street vendors hawking peanuts and cigars. You reach the gate at Broadway and 165th Street, the main entrance. Single ramp leads you up to the grandstands, wooden bleachers beneath a shallow roof overhead, but much of the seating exposed. In foul territory bleachers, you may be perched close to the outfield barrel with only a fence and a handful of feet separating you from the rock-strewn slope leading down. Mosquitoes, gnats, yes, a swamp used to run nearby. Visitors reported insects buzzing around the outfield during late summer games. Bathrooms, they were limited. Concessions, modest. The structure lacked many of the comforts we now take for granted. Add to that the weather. Wind howling off the Hudson, rain puddles forming in the outfield after storms that drained imperfectly. Seats could be damp, the view imperfect, and yet the panorama was stunning. From the top of the grandstands looking west, you could glimpse the Hudson River and the New Jersey Palisades beyond, a sweeping backdrop of the city and nature. The name Hilltop wasn't just poetic, it was literal, but not everyone was tender in their appraisal. Some critics decried the ballpark as the dump on the hill. The nickname stuck among detractors, though fans who braved the climb often had high hopes for the new team. Wild, raucous New York crowds, rowdy, loud, eager for a spectacle. You heard the wooden boards creak as the crowd rose for a deep drive to center. You smelled the charcoal from the vendors near the entrance. You felt the thrill of a new franchise staking out its place in the city. In short, an experience that mixed struggle, charm, and the promise of something bigger. This rugged stage hosted the early years of the team that would become the legendary New York Yankees. From 1903 to 1912, the club known initially as the Highlanders called Hilltop Park home. The 1903 opening day for the Highlanders at Hilltop Park was April 30th. The club finished 72 and 62, a respectable fourth-place finish. Attendance, only about 211,000 for the season, less than half the nearby Giants' attendance. In 1904, the team took a major leap, with opening of the nearby West Side subway station improving accessibility. The Highlanders improved their performance behind ace pitcher Jack Crespo, who would record 41 wins that season, one of the greatest pitching seasons in history. The club battled the Boston Americans for the American League flag. On October 10th, 1904, an all-time high crowd of 28,584 jammed Hilltop Park to see the season's climax, only to have their hopes dashed by Crespo's wild pitch that allowed Boston to win. For that season, the Highlanders posted a 92 and 59 record, second place, but success in attendance too. Over 430,000 paying customers, more than double the previous year. Over the years, the ballpark witnessed several historic performances. In 1908, the venerable Cy Young pitched his third and final career no-hitter at Hilltop Park on June 30th in an 8-0 Boston triumph. Later that September, legendary pitcher Walter Johnson blanked the Highlanders 3 times in 4 days. These performances underscore that while the venue often derided, the level of top-tier play that happened there was undeniably major league. The physical dimensions of the field contributed to a distinct style of the game. With the massive outfields and high fences, inside the park home runs were frequent. During this time, rivalries counted. The Highlanders versus Boston, the intra-city challenge with the Giants looming. Every game at Hilltop Park felt like a statement, not just a contest. Beyond the turf and the timber, Hilltop Park carried heavy symbolism. It wasn't simply a ball field. It was a message. The American League, under Ban Johnson, had finally secured permission in early 1903 to establish a ball club in New York, the biggest sports market in the country. The site at Hilltop Park represented that foothold. At the same time, the National League powerhouse, the New York Giants, under owner John T. Bush, had long dominated New York baseball. Bush and Johnson had long squabbled back in Cincinnati and later in the Western League. The rivalry now played out on the Manhattan slopes. Hilltop Park was the upstart league's claim on high ground, looking out towards the Hudson. The American League said, "We're active, we're New York-based, we're here to stay." The team nickname Highlanders was not just about the height of the field. It hinted at the team's aspiration. It's fair to say, without this rugged venue, the Yankees dynasty might never have developed in quite the way it did. Yet, for all its promise, Hilltop Park's time was brief. From its opening in April 1903 to its final major league game in October of 1912, the ballpark lasted just 10 seasons. In 1911, the Polo Grounds suffered a disastrous fire. The Giants needed a temporary home. Hilltop Park offered itself. From April 15th, 1911 until about May 30th, the Giants played home games there while their ballpark was being rebuilt. Meanwhile, the Highlanders, by then commonly called the Yankees, were in flux. Their lease on Hilltop Park was nearing expiration. The proposed relocation to Kingsbridge Road faltered, hampered by flood problems from the nearby creek. The final Major League game at Hilltop Park was played on October 5th, 1912, an 8-6 victory for the home club over Washington. 4 days later, a college football game would mark the last sporting event before the ground fell quiet. By 1914, the wooden bleachers had been demolished. The site remained vacant for years until in 1928, the legendary Columbian Presbyterian Medical Center opened on the property. All that remains today is a small bronze 5-sided plaque placed in 1993, marking the exact location of home plate for Hilltop Park. The plaque reads, "Dedicated to Columbian Presbyterian Medical Center and the community of Washington Heights by the New York Yankees to mark the exact location of home plate in Hilltop Park. Home field for the New York Highlanders from 1903 to 1912, later renamed the New York Yankees." So the hilltop that once echoed with cheers and wooden boards creaking now echoes with the quiet hospital corridors and medical research. The wood stands have gone, the crowds dispersed, yet the memory stays. Hilltop Park didn't last. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't flawless, yet it was essential. Without Hilltop Park, without that High Ridge ballpark, there may never have been a Yankees dynasty. When you close your eyes and picture a ballpark on a hill, the wooden grandstand, the foul-line bleachers, the Hudson glinting beyond the outfield, it's not just nostalgia, it's proof. Proof that even imperfect places matter. Proof that ambition, location, and grit can plant the seeds of greatness. So the next time you walk by 165th Street and Broadway, pause. There's a plaque, a memory, a home plate that once marked a starting point. And somewhere in that hilltop breeze, you can almost hear the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the hope of a franchise on the rise. Thank you for joining us for this mini episode of The Road to October. Make sure to like and subscribe, as well as leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure to join us next time as we cover more stories in baseball history. I'm your host, Ryan Lorenz. Thank you again for listening.